Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Parent Chat. Thank you for being with us tonight. My name is Bonnie McDaniel, and I'm a member of the Balance in Mind team. I'm filling in tonight for Sherry Gazit, who's on vacation. The topic tonight is technology and sexuality, how to talk to your child. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us on this beautiful evening to spend some time talking about what is an important but can sometimes be a little bit of an awkward topic. We want to encourage you to participate and get your questions answered. Joe will be presenting to us tonight, but please feel free to ask questions. You can put questions in the chat box, or you can send them anonymously using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the toolbar there. After his presentation, Joe's going to respond to some questions from the audience. So let me introduce Joe to you. Joe is a dad and a therapist and a sex educator in the Seattle area. There we go. And for the last 20 years, he's worked at the intersection of adolescence, technology, and sexuality. Joe speaks internationally using information and humor to help parents and professionals increase their knowledge and self-confidence as a proactive defense against some of the unfortunate consequences that can happen as teens explore their developing sexuality in a technology-centered world. So I will hand it over to Joe. Welcome, Joe. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Bonnie. Thank you for the introduction. I'm super excited to be here. I love talking about this stuff. And I really appreciate, like you said, people coming out tonight on what ended up being like a pretty gorgeous day here in the Pacific Northwest. So I appreciate everyone taking the time out to do that. These conversations are pretty important. And now more than ever, right? Because a lot of us have been doing our screens more than we have ever before. And so this is a terrific topic to have tonight. Like she said, my name is Joe. I'm a therapist. I'm a sex and tech educator for kids and families. I'm a therapist by trade. And I've found, with working with kids for all these years, and I'm being able to remember a time before the internet happened, like many of you probably can as well, how intricately entwined like sex and technology is right now, and how important these conversations can be. So I've devoted a part of my practice to writing books and traveling around and doing talks like this. I'm trying to help parents kind of figure out what's coming down the pike, what to look out for in terms of red flags and how to handle those things when they come up. A couple of disclaimers. I am very aware that I am a kind of crunchy, sort of groovy, American liberal, educated West Coast, secular, cisgendered white dude. So not all of my values are necessarily going to mesh completely with your values. And I want to share with you tonight some of the things that I've learned in my meandering journeys with teenagers around sex and technology and safety. So I just want to put that out there. Sex and tech, like I said, are now kind of intricately linked. So much of the average kid's sexual information is gleaned from the internet. And so much of their sexual experimentation and behavior is done that way as well. And it is just impossible now to talk about sex without talking about technology. And it is impossible to talk about technology with kids without also talking about sex. These things are mushed together in a way that we will not be able to undo, I believe. So this evening specifically, I'm going to do an overview of kind of tween behavior in this digital age with regard to sexting. The internet, is an amazing way for all of us to connect and to share, for kids to grow and learn and be exposed to things that they might not be able to if they're left only to their kind of real life and their non-technical devices. I am not against that kind of connection. In fact, I'm a big, giant fan of the internet. However, when I talk about the internet with families, when I talk about it with kids in my office or on Zoom these days, I really kind of emphasize that the internet is a tool, not a toy, right? Like a car, like a weapon. If you don't know what you're doing, really bad things can happen. And kids, obviously don't understand that. Sometimes grownups don't understand that either. But in terms of technology, generally speaking, as grownups, right, our experience has been a little bit different. Most of us got to a certain level of social skills and manners and communication skills. And then we had to generalize those things and overlay those things onto our online lives when the internet happened, right? But Our, do a little shout out, like a thumbs up in the chat if you remember a time before like the internet happened. Our kids do not have that luxury, right? And they have had so much tech shoved down their little throats, then they've had the time to develop the etiquette that goes along with that, right? Our kids also kind of view the internet a little bit differently than we do, because for most of them, the internet has always been there, right? So to them, it's a grown up. The internet can be trusted. The internet knows what it's doing, right? No, it does not. We understand that as grown-ups, right? But it's a very different perspective than what most kids are coming at this with. And there's no walled garden online for kids, right? Um, there's no like kind of safe way to do the internet with kids. It's kind of like the internet or there's not the internet. You can wade into the pool and there's safety stuff to do, and we can talk about that later if people want. But generally speaking, like it's just like the real world. Like here's the world, you have to help your kid interact with it, right? We need to acknowledge, of course, that there are bad guys out there, right? But far and away, most of the damage that's done to tweens and teens on the internet is done to and by themselves, right? With porn and cyberbullying, and tonight's focus, sexting, being the three biggest bads that they kind of have to deal with as young people coming up in this digital age. So I want to talk about sexting tonight. I want to define that, right? It's kind of hard to do. When you say sexting, right? Most people kind of think nude pictures. It can also be sexualized texts, and I use the term digital flirting, right? It's a little bit of a different way to come at it than sexting is, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Generally speaking, right? Flirting, impulsive decisions, those are in the job description of any kid who has a teen in their name, right? And it's been that way since the beginning of time. But the major difference between current and future generations and those of us that came before them is that everyone has a camera with them at all times right now, right? Chances are, statistically speaking, even though we're doing a webinar here, if you're not looking at me on your phone is probably within arm's reach of you right now, right? So when I talk about this topic in person, I usually have people sort of raise their hand. I haven't figured out how to do that on Zoom with this yet, but generally speaking, I say, raise your hand, parents, right? And then keep it up. If you have never, ever done anything stupid or done anything impulsive or done anything uncharacteristic or maybe even illegal when you were a kid, right? And by the time I get to the end of that list, typically speaking, nobody has their hand up anymore. If you would have still had your hand up, I would be interested in talking to you afterwards maybe. But most people made of human parts growing up as adolescents did things that were stupid and impulsive and out of character and even crossed legal lines sometimes, right? We all have that thing, right? Capital T, that capital T thing, like that thing that we did, right? That if we got caught, we would have definitely gone to jail, or if it had gone a little more south, somebody could have ended up seriously injured or dead, right? That thing that we haven't maybe been, brave enough to tell our parents about even yet, probably aren't going to tell our kids about. Everyone has that thing, right? So what I ask parents to do then is kind of just imagine if we had the kind of technology back then in our pockets to document all of those things, whatever that thing was you just thought of for yourself, right? If your bestie had videoed that and it was still bouncing around on YouTube and your kids could watch it, right? That's what our kids are up against, but they do not understand this, right? So specifically with regard to sexting, right? Sexting is an interesting thing to talk about and learn about and deal with, like, professionally in my profession. It is a diverse and really kind of complicated phenomenon. In general, I divide sexting into kind of four main flavors, right? So the first one is consensually shared images between adults, right? We're not particularly worried about that. Some of you might do that, some of you might not do that. A lot of people do. We're generally not a problem, right? We don't really care so much about that. Of the problematic kinds, the kind that revolve around safety of kids or that attract the attention of law enforcement or legal consequences, right? There are serious criminal dynamics like grown-ups soliciting pictures from or sharing pictures with kids, right? That's about a third of the problematic variety. Maliciously or recklessly shared images amongst minors, right? So the kid who sends the pictures that he has of his ex-girlfriend to the whole soccer team when they break up, that kind of stuff, right? That's about another third, right? 31%. And then sexting also has another third that are sort of non-malicious pictures that are shared consensually between like two kids who are already in a relationship of some kind, right? Those are kind of characterized as experimental behaviors. They still fall into the problem category in most places because of the legality, which we're going to talk about. But generally, there's that 1/3 that's just kids trying stuff out with each other, right? That experimental sexting has more to do with like normative adolescent impulses that have always been happening that we did too when we were our kids' age, right? Finding romantic partners is about 10% of that. Flirting and just getting it's like attention from people, right, is another like about 20% of that. And then trying on different aspects of their personality and their sexuality and just trying new things on, right? That is also something that um, that falls into that category. So those experimental behaviors among youth are no different than they have been for any generation. Like I said, we all did it that way too. We just didn't use screens, right? So technology has always enabled people to explore their sexuality, learn about themselves and their role like as sexual creatures in the world, right? In the 70s, it was kind of like Polaroid pictures and Playboy magazines, but that was the technology then, right? In the 80s, we graduated up to like the Playboy channel on cable and those creepy beaded back rooms in the video rental stores, right? Anybody remember those? In the 90s, we got DVDs and those 1-800 numbers. And then the internet happened, right? And then everything just kind of blew wide up. And so sexting with smartphones, dating and hookup apps, those are just the latest incarnation of experimental learning sexual behaviors that humankind has always used technology for. And by virtue of the fact that kids are doing it over the media lines and that they're kids, it makes it against the law in most places. In fact, felony, 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 right? So 3 ways. Any naked image of anybody under the 18 can be defined as child pornography in 3 different ways. Even if it's their own stuff, right? It is a felony to create child pornography. It's a felony to distribute it over media lines, which is what they do when they're using their phones. And it's a felony to possess child pornography. So it's a felony 3 different ways, right? So our kids need to understand that it is only called sexting. In fact, if you notice when I said it earlier, I used sarcastic quotation marks, right? It is only called sexting when everybody involved is over the age of 18, right? And so when kids are in my office and they say the word sexting, I make them hold up their hands and use sarcastic quotation marks when they say it. And I say, you're not talking about sexting, you're actually talking about child pornography because you're still only 16 and your girlfriend's only 15, right? And I make them say those words. I also tend to find myself explaining, particularly to boys, most of my practice is teen boys, right? I find myself explaining to them quite often that sexting is a kind of revolting way to flirt, right? But they don't know how to flirt. Like there's no guidelines for flirting anymore for young people. Um, and it's almost as if Gen Z is like doing it in reverse, right? So sometimes they'll like exchange photos, they'll see each other naked, and then they'll decide if they want to go to the movies together, right? It makes me kind of insane. Grown-ups do this too, so it's not surprising from a role modeling point of view. You know, if you ask folks in their 20s who are out there doing it and dating, like a dick pic is basically dinner and a show now, right? Every one of the teenage girls that I've had in my office in the last 7 or 8 years has had at least one person send a picture of his penis to her on her phone without her consent, right? It's crazy. I have to explain to the boys like this is not equal currency, right? Like generally speaking, girls do not like looking at boy swimsuit areas in the same way that boys like looking at girl swimsuit areas, right? Penises are kind of weird looking, they're sort of scary. I have to explain to them that it doesn't like weigh the same on a scale, right? It's not an equal currency. Girls are not innocent though, right? So statistically speaking, 20% of kids who have a teen in their name and a third of young adults have sent pictures, right? Those numbers double when it's just sexy texting and words, right? And the boy-girl ratio is almost identical. The girls do it just as much as the boys, sometimes a little bit more, depending on the study that you read, because they know that that's what the boys are going to respond to, right? The guys respond to porn and pornish images, and they send pictures of their own swimsuit areas to the girls as if that's what they're actually interested in, right? And then the girls respond to images of their own, which the boys respond to, which creates this like negative pornified cycle, right? And so in terms of helping our kids develop safe and smart skills, both in the real world and in their online interactions, so that they don't just autopilot into this whirlwind, kids need to know a few things, and I want to talk about this tonight, right? So it is really helpful to just give kids, when they're younger and when they first get those connected devices in their hand, and say, hey, this happens, right? At some point, someone is going to ask you for pictures or send you pictures of them with no clothes on. Be ready for it. Come and talk to me when it happens, right? Just giving kids that heads up really reduces that sort of like blunt drama and trauma of when kids are surprised and shocked when it happens, right? Because it can be pretty scary. Kids, especially boys, kind of need to be taught, don't ask for nude pictures, right? Like that's not what flirting looks like. Kids, especially girls, right, need to be told, unfortunately, you don't have to reciprocate. If someone sends you a nude picture, you don't have to send one back, right? When I talk to kids, a lot of them, but primarily, like I said, girl identified kids, report to me. They say, like, I feel a little rude not responding. Like they sent me a picture and it feels awkward not to send one back, right? Which makes me light myself on fire. We have trained our girls in this country to be so deferential and to acquiesce and to smile while they do it to men's needs. It makes me want to light myself on fire. But we've got to teach them and tell them it is okay. You do not have to reciprocate just because somebody else did that, right? Felony, felony, felony. That's always a good thing. If you can help me sort of like smash that into their ears, I would really appreciate it. And then the other thing that kids need to know that I find myself talking about a lot in my office is how to flirt, right? How to let somebody know that you like them. There are no role models for that anymore. It is really hard to find, right? There's like the big, grand, romantic, will you marry me gestures in movies. And there's like the silly, goofy sitcom flirting fails. But that sweet spot of what it actually looks like when a human person likes another human person and they want to get to know each other better, kids don't know how to do that, right? So sitting down with your kid and like have the conversations, like have those sex talks, have the text talks, and pepper in flirting when you're doing that. Really, I would appreciate if that could happen. So those are like the kind of the main topics that I focus on when I'm talking with kids and I'm talking with families in my offices. And I'd like to hear, we've got some great questions already in the hopper, but if there are questions coming up, I would love to see what is happening out there and kind of what's happening in your homes, what questions you all have about this topic.
Looks like we don't have any questions showing up yet in the chat, so please feel free to use either the chat or the Q&A function if you'd like to submit a question. Joe, would you like to take a couple questions that we got in advance?
Yeah, we got a couple of those advanced questions and they were fantastic. So yeah.
Okay, so some of these are about sexting, but also some have to do with pornography and meeting people online strangers. So we'll just take them one at a time. The first one is, my son is a good kid. I don't think he'd ever send anyone inappropriate text messages. I'm reluctant to talk to him about it because I don't think it's really necessary. I think he might find it insulting. Do we really have to address this topic?
I think, yes, we definitely do need to address this topic. Kids across the board, even the good ones, even the smart ones, the ones that get straight A's, the well-behaved ones, when the hormones hit, when they get those like active sexual thoughts and active sexual feelings, kids do a lot of stuff in terms of experimenting, that things that don't seem like it would be a good idea when they wake up in the morning, but for some reason that night, it definitely seemed like a good idea. And I can share scary stories of the crazy things that kids have done in the throes of hormones, but sending pictures of their penis to people is definitely up there and one of them. So it really does help, in service of like anything that we can do to give our kids pause, to just let them just pause for 30 seconds before they hit send. Anything we can do is great. And for him to have your voice in the back of my head, like, oh, even though she's told me this 12 times since I was 10 years old, and I roll my eyes every time, and she kind of makes a joke out of it, like, don't send a picture of your penis to anybody. Maybe I'm not going to do that, right? So it really, the benefits can far outweigh the awkward. But make it a joke. Just work it in when you do it. You'll hear about it referenced. Everything from politicians to sitcoms. When it comes up, just look at your kid and say, "Don't do it." Just work it in there somehow. But it is definitely a topic. Kids should definitely understand what your values are around the kind and quality and who receives the pictures that they take with their devices.
Thanks for that. Let's go ahead and do another question here. This one has to do with that eye rolling, right? Like this one says, the last thing my daughter wants to do is to talk to her parents about her phone and sex. She considers both of these topics to be none of our business. I think if we tried to bring this subject up, she'd just tune us out. Do you have any suggestions for communicating with her in a way that might actually have an impact?
Yes, I get this flavor of question quite a bit. It's one of the most popular ones of the panicked calls and emails that I get. So it kind of starts at the beginning, right? So like I talk a lot about car metaphors with kids. I think it's a way that they really can kind of wrap their brains around some of these concepts because they understand that the same rules don't apply. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that like for cars, right? So nobody listening to this is going to take their car keys one day and just give them to their kid and say, go learn how to drive, good luck, have fun. That is bananas, right? Nobody would ever do that. Our kids understand that. No kids think that their parents are going to do that with them and that that's how they're going to get access and the ability to drive a car. They understand that. But in comparison to that, there is this vibe that, kids get a phone for their birthday or the sixth night of Hanukkah or whatever. And then they say, oh, thanks for the phone, mom and dad. See ya, bye. And there's just no conversation about it, right? A third of families in America have zero rules about their kids' screens, right? A third of American families. That is crazy and it causes so much problems, right? And so there is an attitude with some kids that like, oh, I don't have any rules. I don't have to have a conversation about this. When we give our kids a connected device, it really helps to set the tone about behavioral expectations. I love contracting with kids. If any of you have heard me before or been to my website, I have templates on there. I love contracting with kids about behavior, right? And one of the things that we say is that, you are learning to drive this technology just like a car, right? I am going to be with you while you are learning. I'm going to be sitting in the passenger seat while you learn how to drive this thing. And I'm going to watch you make mistakes and dent your fender and recalibrate and gain some experience. And that leash will be let out pretty slowly. But monitoring, their behavior on there, doing spot checks, not allowing phones in rooms. There should be rules and guidelines for the things. And kids are going to want to push back that, especially, for some of you, if you've already done that, like the bulls out of the barn kind of thing, right? Like they already have the phone, they've had it for a while. How am I supposed to go back and kind of back the truck up? Just do it. Honestly, you can throw me under the bus. I get a lot of hate mail as well, right? You can say, I talked to this guy named Joe. He was handsome and smart, but he told me all this scary stuff. And so now this is what we're going to do with your phone. Just blame me if you need to. But if you're creative and you can think outside the box, you can use any time of year to do this, right? It's springtime, right? It's a new vibe. Maybe it's somebody's birthday. School year is about to end. Summer's coming, right? COVID is like maybe ending and things are opening up. Like, you can just say, we've been inside for a year and a half. Like, we're going to have a new vibe now. Here's what the new rules are going to look like with the phone, right? And kids will balk and have a problem with it. They are contractually obligated to do so because see above, re teenager, right? But you can just say, hey, this is a big kid device, right? Like this is something that takes some responsibility and some initiative. And if you want to act like a little kid and throw a fit, then that's fine. You can have little kid rules for devices. But if you want to be a big kid and you want to have like an active smartphone and be out in the world interacting with people, then we expect you to act like a big kid, right? And so appeal to that part of them that wants to be seen as mature, that wants to be seen as independent, that wants to be seen as responsible. They're in there, right? So appeal to that part of them and just say, we need to come up with rules.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions coming in, so this is great. People have a lot of things they ask about
I know
this.
it's too
I'm
much to
just
read
gonna
for me,
fire
but
them
you
at you.
can feed it to me.
Yep. So my 14-year-old female child's good friend is a trans girl to boy, announced within 3 months. Now, when I send her over for a play date, it feels different to me. How should I think about this?
Well, it kind of depends, I suppose, on how different it feels to you. And they didn't give any more information, but I think so. Their child, I'm guessing, is girl identified, had a friend who was girl identified that is now boy identified. You can talk to your kid and just kind of, again, lay down the expectations about whatever it is that you're worried about. I'm guessing it's sexual behavior. So you can just say, hey, this is the rule. We don't want you, having sex until this age. We don't want stuff happening in the house. When you're in your room with any friends, like the door stays open, like whatever those rules are, just have it be about everyone, not specifically about that kid, because we don't have it. I mean, you might have more information, but with what we gave us, we don't have any information. So it could be a friend who used to identify as a girl, but now identifies as a boy and likes other boys. So sex is probably a non-issue in that situation. So, you can't like assume that just because that person is now boy identified that they like girls. But whether they do or not, if you make your rules for your kid about everyone who comes into contact in your house, on your time, on your watch, in their room, that kind of thing, then it shouldn't be an issue.
All right, thank you. The next question is it a felony for sexting just on texting platform or on the phone or any platform, for example, Discord or Instagram?
Yes, any platform. So, and that is generally speaking on a federal level. So not every state. There are some states that are working specifically in the area that I talked about. If it's two adolescents, right, two minors, but they're within the same kind of age range and they are not doing anything that would be illegal otherwise, and they are keeping the pictures in between, so like just amongst themselves, right? That some states are working to not prosecute that as child porn and have those kids get in trouble, be registered, all that kind of stuff. And I've actually been working with some people within the ACLU in Washington State to try to change some of that legislation as well. So with that is specifically changing. Now, like I said, the kid who takes the picture and sends it to the whole math class or whatever, like that's a different game, game on. But generally speaking, anyone under 18 across the board, done in any kind of way with screens is considered a felony. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question here, I have 17, 14, 12, and 8-year-old boys. My 8-year-old son's
Wait,
ears.
hold on. Sorry, 17, 14, 12, and 8?
12 and 8.
Okay, wow.
That's a range.
That is a range.
So the 8-year-old's ears and eyes have seen things he isn't old enough to have seen thanks to his older brothers. How do you suggest talking to older siblings about being cognizant of younger brothers in the room, especially when friends are over and the younger brother wants to be around the older because it feels cool to be around big kids?
Yeah, navigating, especially, I'm sure a lot of us have experienced that. Like if you have kids of disparate ages and trying to like have a movie night and get everyone that, can be pleased can be really challenging. And with 4 boys in that large of a range, like I don't even know what that looks like. So good luck to you. But generally speaking, I tell, right, same with what I did with my kids, right? Like, so with the older one, just talk to them and say, you can watch this movie because it has this content or these words in it or whatever it is, because we're trusting you, like you are old enough to do that. But part of this is responsibility, right? I remember from my son, it was the Goonies, right? He was, a little bit younger, but 3 years older than my other kid. And, but I said, like, you're old enough to handle this. We're going to watch the Goonies. I will tell you right now, if they say the word shit 5 times in that movie, do you know what that word means? And we talked about it and everything. And I said, great, that's awesome. I trust you. You can totally handle this. If your sister starts saying that word, I will know where she learned it and it will be you. And we're going to have to talk about this, right? So again, appealing to that part of your kid, whatever age they are, that wants to be seen as responsible enough to consume that media. Part of, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Part of that responsibility is watching out for the younger siblings that are coming up behind you because they're not ready for it yet, right?
Right,
So
thanks.
hopefully that helps.
Okay, another question coming in on the Q&A. I have a 10-year-old daughter. She's recently exploring a few sexual contents on the internet. When do you think is the right time for me to talk to her?
It kind of depends on the topic. But I would say, yeah, if she, clearly she is at a place where she's curious. And so that is a great time to talk to her. And at that age, I would really recommend going old school with books, with pages and paper. There's some fantastic like books about sexuality and pregnancy and development and bodies and sex. And I would focus on that content rather than online content. For a couple of reasons. The online content, there is some great stuff out there for older teens, not 10-year-olds, I would say. And at 10, we don't want to necessarily, foster like an idea like, oh, you have a question, let's get our internet out and ask, right? At 10, you hopefully kind of want to guide them and say, I'm your source. So you have a question, you come to me and I will help you. And if we need help, I will take you to the internet with me and we will figure it out. But generally speaking, you want to like direct your kid a little bit to you for your questions when they're 10 and not necessarily Google.
Thank you. Okay, so another one is I suspect my 15-year-old son is watching pornography on his mobile. How can I confront him for a constructive discussion?
Okay, that is a great question. So one, I would kind of maybe hold the word confront a little bit loose. If kids have access to the internet, then likely that's because they were allowed. In there's cases sometimes, I guess, if parents have set up some pretty good like monitoring systems and kids have managed their way around it. But if the kid has just gone and found porn because he can go and find porn, that's not really his fault necessarily. It's totally normative for kids to be curious about sex and bodies. And like I just was referencing a second ago, like Google is the easy answer to all those questions. So maybe not confront him, but having a conversation at that age is great. And these conversations about pornography are different depending on kids' developmental levels. And so at 15, I think I would kind of direct the conversation more toward what we call porn literacy, right? So asking them about his philosophy, like how often is he doing it? Where is he getting the images? What does he think about them? How is he holding like ideas and expectations around masculinity, femininity, men and women, about sex, talking about body image stuff, looking at it just like we do when we talk about media literacy in general, but specifically about porn literacy, right? And I would say at that age, one of the things to clarify that I really encourage is giving kids like a 50% rule, right? I mean, you can say you're the mom or dad, like you can say like, I want to be 0. But in terms of porn literacy, it's highly unlikely that a lot of our kids are going to go their whole lives and never look at porn. So talking to them like we do about food, like we do about substances, like we do about alcohol, right? Like how porn like a grown up and not like a kid. How can you do porn responsibly, right? terms of your values, in terms of their values. But I give kids in that age range like a 50% rule, right? If you do it, only do it 50% of the time. The other half of the time, just use your brain and your own imagination, not somebody else's imagination, right? You need those imagination muscles for things like empathy and romance, those kinds of things. If you just are consuming someone else's imagination while you're developing your own sense of sexuality, you give up all control over that, right? So those are the kinds of conversations I would have. I would probably say, unless you are very like close, tight, open, discussing family with boys specifically, kids in general, but boys specifically, do it in the car, do it on a hike, do it on a bike ride, do it while you're playing video games, like do something shoulder to shoulder with them. Don't sit and have a conversation with your kids staring at their eyes like this about pornography. He will kill you or himself, right? So try to do it shoulder to shoulder and make it something that you're doing, and talk about it as much as a third concept as you can, which is another great thing about porn literacy. You can talk about porn literacy and not necessarily about him and his porn use, right? So those are some of the tips that I would say in terms of how to talk to a 15-year-old about suspected porn use.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Joe. No one tells parents how to approach these things, so it's really great to get your perspective. So another question is, my daughter will turn 11 just before entering middle school in September. She's always the youngest in the year. I'm wondering how we approach this whole topic when she literally doesn't know anything, hasn't hit puberty yet. I want her to be aware, but not overwhelmed.
That's great. Just talk to her. Even just saying something as simple as that will be great. She's probably aware that she's the youngest kid in her class. Most people do. And she will not be the only one who, enters into 6th grade that hasn't hit puberty yet. There will be a lot, right? The numbers are all over the board with there. She's going to have friends who have, she'll have friends who haven't. And so just giving her a heads up again, like a couple of questions ago, just saying, hey, you're going to have questions like, I want to be the resource, or hey, we have this great stack of books that we got. Happy middle school. Here you go. When you've got questions, like, let's just talk about it, and then we'll research it together, but no Googling stuff right now, right? Because it takes you off in all kinds of different directions. And then I would say, just like, depending on your relationship with her, it can be really nice to just set a tone of like, hey, we're just going to go weekly and have a cup of tea or some ice cream or go on a walk or whatever. And just talk about like, what new words did you hear in middle school this week? What's something that you heard about that you think you might know what it is, but you don't necessarily know what it is? What's the newest thing about sex that you've heard from a friend? Just ask those kind of questions and see what comes up. A lot of times kids have information, or they think they have information that they've gleaned from their friends, but they really do want to ask us and they just don't kind of know how. So just, every once in a while, just open up the window a little bit and say, hey, you can talk to me about this stuff if you want to. Remind them that you're a resource.
Great, thank you for that. All right, let's try one more question here. I overheard my daughter telling her friend in the car that she gets messages from sugar daddies all the time. It sounded like she didn't have any problems with the concept, even considering it female empowerment, although she said she'd never answered any of the messages. Is this a real thing? Any tips for how I can communicate my concern?
It is a real thing. It is also a fake thing sometimes. And, that is a way that, it is a relationship that people have, adult grown-up people have, right? Where one person wants to sort of mentor and support the younger person. And there's often like a sexy vibe in between this kind of thing. That is not something for adults and kids to be having together, right? That part is not okay. So, it is a vehicle that predators can use to kind of trick kids into giving them access to them or access to information. So I think it's really important when you hear that to just say, hey, just so you know, that is crazy illegal if it is grownups and minors or minors and minors, right? and just let her know that like not only could she get in trouble, but like the other person can get in trouble as well, and just give her a little bit of heads up around predator manipulation and how people will do things like that in order to try to get information. They will cover her with flattery and even gifts and money, or try to, right? And you can just say, if these things happen, you need to come and talk to me right away.
Great, thank you. So one more question. This one is, my kid is non-binary. I'm trying to learn what that means, and I'm not sure how to communicate with them about safe sex and technology. I want to be a responsible parent, but I just don't have any experience in this area, and I'm afraid of stepping on toes or causing offense. Any suggestions?
It can be very intimidating, right? When a kid identifies as non-binary or any of those adjectives, there's so many of them right now. It can be really overwhelming and confusing. It's okay to do that, right? So you can I would just sort of say what you just said, but kind of in reverse, and just say, I don't want to cause offense. I don't really know how to talk about this stuff. I'm still wrapping my brain around the concept and some of the language, because this is it's people are thinking about this differently than when I was your age. So I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but this is what I want to say. And then, just ask for their help with it, right? Kind of let them be sort of in the expert seat around the languaging, but have the conversation anyway. The sex ed can be different for for non-straight, non-cisgendered kids. But the basic stuff is not really all that different, right? It's like things go inside other things, and you want to cover them and be protected. And let's talk about pregnancy anyway, just in case. And just have the same kinds of conversations. There's no real magic formula to talking about queer kids, about sex ed, and it can be different. If I can log roll for a second, I have a book called The Pride Guide. It is, Langford is the last name. You can find it kind of any bookstore near you, Amazon, bookshop, online, anything like that, you can find it. So it is a handbook for kids who are growing up LGBTQ, puberty, what's happening to my body, digital safety, safer sex, technology, flirting, all that stuff is in there for those kids. And there's a whole section in the back just for parents. So almost like a fifth of the whole book is written just for you in these kinds of situations. So it breaks down the language and will kind of really help you sort of jump in that pool and start splashing around in a more confident way. So I would definitely say that would be a great resource for you and your kid probably as well, and a great vehicle for conversation, because you can say, all right, I just read this, go read chapter 6, and then let's go get some ice cream and talk about it. Something like that would be a great way to facilitate conversation as well.
All right, thanks. Joe, I just want to let you know that I found that book as I was getting to know about you, and I ordered it because I have a kid in that space. So
Nice.
really looking forward to using that. I think it'd be a big help. So
good.
Thank you.
I think it will be, and I would love feedback. So.
All right. Another question says, my kid, 11, trusts her peer quite easily. What if a peer asks for a photo and says, I won't share it? I don't want her to develop any kind of distrust with her peer, but also want her to be careful. How do I deal if such a situation arises?
Well, so yeah, at that age, that happens, right? So that is a natural stage where kids start pulling away from their parents and start gravitating toward peers. Some of that has been kind of thrown off in the last year and a half because of quarantine, but that is the development that kids are supposed to be practicing right now, that kind of independence and kind of creating their tribe, and friends can, and their ideas and attitudes can kind of start to weigh more on the scale than parents. But you can just say, just want to remind you and be really clear, like, this is what our value is, and this is what our rule in the house is around sharing pictures with people, right? And, like we said a few questions ago, just say, like, no sending pictures of your penis or your other body parts, right? I have a family I'm working with that they have the swimsuit rule in their house, right? So any picture of you in a swimsuit or less, there has to be a family member in the photo with you, right? So I thought that was kind of a hilarious, great guideline, and something that kids definitely will think of, right? And so at that age, right? Like entering middle school, entering puberty, kind of expanding into the peer arena and away from home and family a little bit. It's really important to give them at that age like escape hatches, right? So you can kind of practice a script, give them a little out of some kind, like when someone asks you to send them a picture, or when someone sends you a picture that you didn't ask for, or someone offers you marijuana at a party. We give kids like something that they can say or do to get out of that situation, right? This comes up a lot with the porn conversation we were talking about earlier. A lot of guys are like, "Oh, look what I found! Look at that!" Right? And you can just give your kids scripts. Just say, "Oh, hey, that's great, but dot dot dot," and give them something that they can say to get out of that situation when it comes up.
All right, thank you. Another question here. This is not as extreme about the topic today, but seems relevant. I've heard about an instance last year in social media where male students rank female students. How do we intervene and support our kiddos in this situation?
So yes, that does happen, and that is just a very clear example of sort of misogyny and sort of like rampant like toxic masculinity in our culture, and the ways that it trickles down when kids get a hold of these concepts and then come up with something. Yeah, there's a ranking list for all the girls in the school. So it doesn't seem to happen as much as it used to happen because there's more awareness around it, but it still definitely happens, and it'll happen on social media apps as well. It'll happen in the school on this app. Kids will kind of set things up like that sometimes. And so if you get, air of this kind of behavior, I think bringing it to the school is the best way to go, right? And just say, hey, just so you know, this thing is going, and let the school figure out how to address that in terms of, doing having an assembly or doing a talk, presenting about toxic masculinity or its effects on people and culture, things like that. But that is definitely an offshoot of that. And I think, just being in communication with your kid's school and letting them know that that is happening in the school is kind of the best first course of action, I would say.
Great, thank you. So there's a question here that says, how do I deal with it if my teenager's friends are swearing?
I guess it depends. If it's in your house or in your car or something like that, then I think you want to be assertive and just say, hey, you know what, that point check, that's over the line in our house. We don't do that. And you can explain why if you feel like it, but it's kind of your house and you can do whatever you want, right? So that stuff doesn't happen in my house. Knock it off. Um, in my experience, a lot of times when kids do that, they're not allowed to do it at their house either. They're just testing the waters, right? I remember with my son one time, he had a friend over who's like dropped an F-bomb and then just kind of like looked over to see, what my reaction was. And I said, well, we don't do that here, knock it off. And he said, okay. So I think, making sure that you are assertive and kind of saying what your boundary about it is the best course of action. And also role models for all the kids, but particularly your kid. Like when somebody does something that's over the line, you can just say, hey, shut it down. And guess what? They're more than likely shut it down, right? They'll roll their eyes when you leave the room and all that kind of stuff, but that's fine. You did your job of being assertive, explaining what your boundary and your value is, and telling them to stop, right? And then the ball is kind of in their court. So if they're cussing like at baseball practice or at school or in the chats, in the group chat that they're doing online or whatever, then there's not really a whole lot you can do about that, I suppose, except talk to your kid about what they think. What is their philosophy? What words do you think are okay to say out loud at soccer practice, and which ones do you think are probably not okay? And just be having some of those kind of bigger picture philosophical conversations with your kid, because they're out there and there is going to be a range of language and activity and topic matter that they're going to encounter. And so helping them practice kind of sussing out for themselves, like, where are my lines? What do I think? What do I feel? And how am I going to respond to these things when they happen in real life? That's the muscle set that you want to be developing if they're already old enough to be out in the world and having that kind of stuff happen. But again, like I said, if it's in your house, then you call the shots, just be assertive and clear.
Great, thank you. So here's a question about, are there any practical ways parents can keep potential predators away from their kids? Are there any apps that are particularly dangerous to look out for?
Yes, to all of that, I think. Yeah, apps are the primary mode of predator manipulation right now. Some stuff still happens on email, but that is mostly, like Russian hacking bots or people trying to sell you land in Nigeria or something. So those like email scams are kind of more directed toward like older people, like our parents, maybe, our kids are going to be targeted most likely through social media apps. And there's a wide range on there. I talk about them a lot. There's too many to address right here. Again, I could log roll a little bit. I have a podcast on Apple called Appropriate, which I kind of do a deep dive on. I think there's like 75 episodes on there. So you can find an app that you're curious about and listen. They're all just like 5, 8, 10 minutes long. And you can kind of learn a lot about the apps that your kids are exploring and looking at. I kind of rank them good, bad, ugly, and I explain why very clearly. There's definitely ones that you want to steer away from. The most popular ones right now, I will just say, are, kind of youngest to oldest are going TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat, right? Those are like the big ones right now. And so there's a range of safety in there. All of those apps are working to be safe spaces for kids because they have so many kids on there. So they're invested in keeping it as safe as possible. But Snapchat, for example, really, I encourage people every week, just say, wait until your kid is 16. Snapchat is a high school. Ideally, if you have your driver's license, if you're responsible enough to drive a car, you're probably responsible enough to drive Snapchat. But until they get their driver's license and or are 16, I say no Snapchat. But again, that's just me and my values. The rest of them, if that's not in that short list, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, something outside of that, then you just want to do your research about the app and figure out if it's right for you and your kid and your family. There's a range. Some apps are totally healthy and awesome and fun and fine, and some are like that place that the Donkey Boys took Pinocchio, madness. So just kind of do your research. I love to be considered a resource. So try the podcast and or shoot me an email or whatever, and I would love to help out any way I can.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're running out of time. Maybe I'll just put these last two questions here together. I know there's so much to say and so few places to turn for good info about all this stuff. So one of them is, are there any book recommendations on sex ed that can use with a child as young as 3rd grade? And also, is there sex education in public elementary school?
Is there sex education in public elementary school? Yes, there is. Is it enough? Is it going to do everything that you need it to do? No, it is not. It definitely is not. Most sex ed in this country is not even sex ed. I call it reproductive anatomy. So they talk about, how babies are made in very vague general ways. They do very little talking about how babies are not made and why people engage in sexual behavior in general. So there's no LGBT stuff. There's no stuff about pleasure. There's no stuff about prevention. It's just like, this is how babies are made. Don't do it, is kind of the typical mainstream American sex ed class. So what that means is that sex ed falls on us. And there are lots of great resources out there. I don't have any books on the tip of my brain that I can share right now, but my good dear friend and colleague, Amy Lang, some of you have probably heard about her. She's a known quantity. She has a website called birdsbeeskids.com, and she has a fantastic list on her website that I go to for books for all ages. Books for teens, as kids like get into middle school and above. My website, I've got a host of books. I've got 3 or 4 books out dealing with sex, bodies, puberty, relationships, technology, all that kind of stuff. But for the younger kids, I would check out Amy's site for some book recommendations. But one of them is called It's So Amazing. I think that is a great book. And and I can't remember the name of it, the one that a lot of us had when we were kids, the big square one with the little sperm in the top hat. That is still one of the best books out there. Where Did I Come From is what it's called. So that is still like top line of the books that are available and out there, like old classic cheesy 80s goodness, but it's good information and a great springboard for talking about sex with kids.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. We just have a couple minutes left. So I just want to take a second. I'll even pop back on screen and tell you how much I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and be with our parents tonight. I personally found it super useful. I'm sure our audience did as well. Do you have any other kind of final words for us, or like additional places that you really want to point out to us that we can go for further info?
Well, I mean, again, just like to say thank you. I think this topic is really important. I think it's really kind of scary and hard for some people. So yay on all of you for taking the time to come do this and for being brave enough to start thinking about how to have these conversations. Again, I'd love to be considered a resource. And I have done a lot of log rolling tonight, but if I could do one more, I have an app out there. It is called Be Heroes 411. And it is in the Apple App Store, and it is I designed it to specifically address kind of like social, sexual, psychological safety situations, issues that kids face both online and off. It has all different topics from the condom broke to I think I might be gay, how to unplug from video games, how to deal with anxiety, how to bail on an uncomfortable date if you have to. And sexting is definitely on there. Like, what do you do when someone asks you for pictures? What do you do when someone sends you an unsolicited picture? Each section has detailed, like highly detailed kind of do's and don'ts. There's dozens and dozens of situations on there. It's like go time, real information and links that kids can have in their pocket for when something goes down, but they might not have like the life experience or the presence of mind to deal with it on their own. And maybe you're not sitting right next to them. So they have some like, real world helpful things that they can do in the moment when those kinds of things happen. So Be Heroes 411 on the Apple App Store. If you're at all interested, have your kid put it on their device and carry it around with them. Check it out. I'm really proud of it. It's pretty new. And I'd love to just have people know about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a plug for that too, because I found that and looked it up and showed it to my teens, and they were like giving it a little respect, like, hey, that actually seems pretty useful. So
yeah,
that's
really,
not an
that's
easy
great.
thing.
No eye rolls. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, maybe a little bit of an eye roll, but definitely also some interest. So
Okay.
yeah, that was a big win.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again for being with us, Joe. I have just a quick announcement to make about our final parent chat of the year. I'll share my screen really quickly. If I can, let's see. Well, so our very last parent chat, having trouble sharing my screen here. There we go. Is going to be on June 2nd. And the topic is supporting your kiddo as they explore attraction, sexuality, and gender. That's going to be with Jen O'Ryan, who is an inclusion and diversity strategist with Double Tall Consulting. So that came up a little bit tonight. If you or your kiddo or your cousin or the kid on your kids team is in this zone and you want a little bit more info, Jen O'Ryan's going to help us out with that.
And can I just say, like, she is fantastic. Like, she knows her stuff. Like she's great. So that would be a really great topic.
Good. Well, yes.
I also wanted to let people know that on June 3rd, we will be having a third of our What You Need to Know About series. And this one is going to be about what you need to know about teens' mental health and safety, especially firearm safety, drugs and medication safety, other substances. We have people from Youth Eastside Services and Seattle Children's coming to talk about how to have the conversation and what you need to know.
All right. Thanks, Val.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I think that that wraps us up. We're a couple minutes past 8. So one more big thanks to everybody who is here tonight. As we say goodbye to you, if you could take a quick moment and complete this poll just to get a sense of, can you see that? See the poll? There we go. How things went for you tonight. That would be fantastic. All right. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks, Joe. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.